Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this virtual Virginia Small Grains Field Day. Basically, we'd like to thank all the sponsors of this field day, Virginia Grain Producers Association, Crop Improvement, Small Grains Board, and the Warsaw Experiment Station. So today we're going to show you several different things. We're going to start with historical varieties that have been released out of the program since 1990. I started as the breeder in 1989, so we'll take a little history through the program up until current date. So I hope you enjoy this. So we're going to start with barley varieties, some historical varieties, and varieties that have been released from the Virginia Tech program. Bar soy was released in 1967 by the University of Kentucky. The primary goal was to develop an early heading barley that could be used extensively in double cropping with soybeans. The next variety is Boone. It was released in 1974 by North Carolina State University, and as you can see, it has medium length awns. In barley, before they had good combines, thrashing barley with long beards was very difficult as they wouldn't thrash clean. So the program initially was developing nearly awnless varieties, and Boone is an intermediate between long awns and no awns, and this is predominantly the type in our feed barleys today. The next several varieties that we're going to show were developed by my predecessor, Dr. Thomas Starling, who worked with Dr. Rohn, the pathologist, to develop disease-resistant feed barley varieties for the region. Weiser was released in 1989. Basically, it has, in some years, you may be able to see it has somewhat of short lateral awns, and basically this improves test weight somewhat, and Weiser had fairly good test weight. Weiser also has very good durable resistance to powdery mildew, and at the time it had good leaf rust resistance. So Nominee was released in 1991, and actually remember that I started in April 1989, so Nominee was already at the point to be released when I came, and Nominee is still being grown today, 31 years later, predominantly as a forage barley. Starling was released in 1993. Also, it's later heading than Nominee, but also was used for forage, and also was identified as having field resistance to leaf rust. The next one is 268 No-On, and this is a line we're considering releasing to replace Nominee. And basically, you won't see many of these smooth-headed barley varieties because in barley, having an awn is very important to having high test weight, and so all of these smooth-headed barleys tend to have low test weight and not that desirable for feed. The next variety is Monkey. It was released in 1993. As you can see, it has long awns, and because of that and because of the time frame, it was not widely grown because farmers couldn't get it to thrash very well. So remember Boone, back in the second plot, it had those medium length awns, and you'll see in the next group of barleys that this is what we have moved to. The medium length awns are able to thrash off well, and yet you still get higher test weight and better overall quality. So this is Callio. It was the first short awn variety that was released, and also it's early and short, and has good test weight. Price was then released in 2002. It is a medium seasoned variety, also having high test weight and improvement in yield over Callio. Some of the newer varieties, Atlantic was released because of its earliness as a replacement for Callio, and again has the medium on length and very good test weight. So in Virginia, because of our humid environment, we have lots of disease problems, and so the program must breed for disease resistance as well as yield. And Secretariat is one of those varieties. It was released in 2014 that has very good disease resistance and high yield. The most recent feed barley release is SB 255. One of the major disease problems in the area is Fusarium head blight or scab, and many of the previous varieties we saw only have moderate or susceptible to scab. SB 255, released in 2019, shows a significant improvement in scab resistance compared to the other varieties. So the previous varieties we looked at were all what we refer to as hulled feed barleys. Those are the traditional barleys. We're now going to look at what we refer to as hulless or naked barleys. So basically, when these are thrashed, the hull covering of the grain actually thrashes free, so you get naked grain just like you do when you thrash wheat. So our thought here was that basically monogastric animals, chickens, pigs, basically can't digest that fiber, so if you don't have the hull, you have a better quality product and more energy. Joyce was the first hulless variety released in 2003. The second hulless variety was Eve, which is very early heading, and also uniquely was found to have good resistance to Fusarium head blight. The next variety, Dan, which was named in honor of Dan Brand, the previous extension specialist, is a full season hulless variety that has very high test weight. Amaze 10 was released in 2013. You can see basically it has these longer awns, but it also has Thoroughbred as a parent, so when you thrash it, the awns essentially break off. Amaze 10 has high yield potential and good grain quality. In 2020, we released our first two-row variety. So if you compare Amaze 10 and this variety, you can see that the heads, there's only 2 rows that fill grain as opposed to 6 rows in the other barleys. This variety also was identified as having very good resistance to Fusarium, actually even better than Eve, and also has about 10 bushels higher yield than Amaze 10. So this is probably what I would consider to be a major breakthrough in our barley program, Thoroughbred, which was released in 2003. Thoroughbred, as you can see, has long awns. It was developed from a cross between a French Malting Barley Sisson and a Virginia regular feed barley. Thoroughbred has very high yields, also has very high test weight and good quality, and because of its French malting parent, it was later found to also be suitable for malting. So we've seen several breakthroughs in the program. The first was moving from awnless types to varieties that had short awns to varieties that had deciduous long awns, all leading to improvements in test weight and quality. And then we moved into developing Poland's varieties that further increase the starch content and the energy value of barley as a feed. Our most recent objective was to develop malting barleys, and I'm proud to say that this year we got approval to release Avalon, and this will be the first malting barley variety released out of the program. It has excellent, very excellent malting quality. A sister line that we're hoping to release next year tends to have overall better fusarium head blight resistance than Avalon, and also has acceptable quality. So next we're going to look at, first start looking at some historical barleys, and then we will move through all the varieties that have been released out of the program, basically since about 1990 up until current. So the first variety that we're looking at is Blue Boy. It was developed by North Carolina State University, and although you wouldn't think that it looks that short, it was one of the first semi-dwarf varieties that was released and had a significant impact on the industry. Next, I'm going to show you some older varieties developed by my predecessor, Dr. Starling. Potomac was released in 1975. It was a joint release between Virginia Tech and University of Maryland. And actually the previous breeder at Georgia, Jerry Johnson, actually was at Maryland then, and that was one of their varieties. The next variety, Wheeler, was released in 1980. This variety was shown to have excellent milling and baking quality. One of the varieties probably that Dr. Starling was very proud of was Tyler. It was very widely adapted and grown in the Midwest as well as the Mid-Atlantic region. Tyler was released in 1980, and it also is a semi-dwarf. Historically, powdery mildew was a very serious problem in both wheat and barley, and Dr. Starling and Dr. Rohn worked effortlessly to introduce new resistant genes, and Tyler has PM3A, as does the next variety, Saluda. You can see a major height difference between Tyler and Saluda, and basically they're both considered semi-dwarfs, but you can see that Saluda is significantly shorter than Tyler. I also should mention that all the plots we're seeing this morning have been sprayed with growth regulator, the wheat at least, and so it would be actually a little bit taller than what you see here. So this next variety is significant in the fact it was released in 1988, and this was the first exclusive variety released out of the program. So all the previous varieties we saw were public varieties. This was an exclusive variety marketed through FFR Cooperative. So this begins the point where I came into the breeding program, and the next few varieties are varieties that Dr. Starling already had at the stage ready to release, and they were released in 1990 and 1991. Madison, the first one, is an early heading variety. Also some subsequent work with Human Nutrition and Food showed that it had high antioxidant content, which was good for health food. Wakefield, again, I mentioned the need for mildew resistance. Wakefield had a new gene for mildew, PM1A, and basically this gene has been still being used somewhat in the program. This next variety is also very significant in that basically it brought in a very high amount of royalty money from seed sales. FFR was able to sell the variety along with a management practice to control diseases, and worked very well in their favor, and this variety was grown on a large number of acres. It was released in '91. Jackson, you can see, is a little bit taller. It was released in 1993, mainly for grain and forage. So beginning at this point, these are lines that I selected out of crosses that Dr. Pop Starling had left in the program. So the next few we're going to go through a little quicker. FFR 558 was released in 1994. Fury, which had some adaptation in the Mid-Atlantic region, was released in 1995. FFR 566W was released in 1997. And then we released another public variety, Pocahontas, in 1997, and this again had a new and different mildew resistance gene, PM4B. We now come to another significant variety in the program, Roan, that was actually named for Dr. Curtis Roan, who was the pathologist who worked with Dr. Starling. It was released in 1998, and believe it or not, this variety is still being grown in a couple of states. It was very unique in that it had resistance to powdery mildew from PM4A gene, also had Hessian fly resistance, and most notably, which was discovered later, had some resistance to Fusarium head blight. So two other varieties were released as exclusives in 1998. These included USG 3408 and 1812, which was marketed by JGL, now known as Jomar. We then released USG 3209, which has Saluda in its background. It was very early heading, and you can see very short in height. Also in 1999, Century 2 was released and marketed through Jomar, as was 766. So next we come to the next public release, Sisson, was released in 2000. Sisson is unique in that it's actually the first variety that I actually made the cross. So this was all from when I came to the program. So we actually made the crosses in the field that year because I didn't get there till April. Sisson was named in honor of Bill Sisson, who worked at this experiment station for more than 40 years and was a significant contributor to these varieties. Next variety, also released in 2000, was Southern States 520. This variety was grown for a number of years, mainly due to the fact that it's very early heading and also had high yield potential. So you keep in mind that barley heads about a week or 2 weeks earlier than wheat, also matures earlier than wheat, so basically it's better suited for double cropping with soybeans, but because of the price differential between wheat and barley, we still have wheat being double cropped with soybeans in a significant number of acres. So the earliness of this variety is very important. In 2000, we also released Renwood 3260. The uniqueness of this variety is that it has a strong gluten strength. So gluten is the protein that essentially allows you to make dough and have bread to hold together. So this variety basically has strong gluten strength, and as we'll see later, it or a sister line were used in developing some of our hard wheats. So one unique thing in this program is that we are in the Mid-Atlantic region, which means we are between the northern wheat and southern wheat producing areas, and so varieties in this program have been grown from Texas, Louisiana, all the way up into Canada. This variety was developed collaboratively with Ontario Ridgetown College and released as Pro 202 in 2001. The next variety, also released in 2001, was Southern States 560. Its characteristics were that it had high yields and also stiff straw, so basically it had good standability. The next impact of the program, so I should clarify, you're seeing a lot of different types of barley and wheat that have different characteristics. In 1996, essentially there was a significant drop in price of barley and wheat, and so basically I came to the conclusion that we needed to offer growers alternatives to commodity crops. So we began trying to develop hulless barley, white wheat, hard wheat, to give the growers alternatives. So Pearl was released in 2001, and this is the first soft white winter wheat that came out of the program, and it was grown primarily in the Northeast. Michigan, New York, and Ontario produced soft white in the eastern U.S. The next two varieties are actually sister lines from the same cross, but they have quite a few different characteristics. Mccormick was released in 2002, again moving new powdery mildew resistance genes into varieties. These have PM17. McCormick was, of course, named in honor of Cyrus McCormick for the Reaper, and basically was released as a public variety. The sister line Tribute has a different leaf rust resistance gene as well as the same powdery mildew resistance gene. While McCormick has high test weight, Tribute has exceptionally high test weight. So in a good year, it can have a test weight of 64 pounds per bushel. Two other varieties released in 2002 were Venture, which was aimed more at the southern northern corn belt, and RC Strategy, which again was targeted for production in Ontario. So, variety released in 2003 was USG 3706. Another variety was FFR 9750. You can see that 9750 has a very notable dark green color. Also, you can see that the variety stays within the rows, so you can see clearly the rows. Also, you can see the erect flag leaves. So essentially, with this type of variety, the light can penetrate into the canopy and you can have more photosynthesis and higher yields. The next variety is Armor 3015, released in 2003. This one was targeted more for the southeast. Another unique variety was Rachel. It basically had, again, very strong gluten strength and was used as a specialty wheat, and it was released in 2003. Another specialty wheat released in 2003 was MPV 57. Basically, it was targeted for both grain and forage. Two varieties released in 2004 included Choptank, which was jointly released with University of Maryland, and it actually was a sister line of Sisson. And Featherstone 176 also was released for more regional production in 2004. In 2005, again, we jointly released a variety Chesapeake with University of Maryland, and actually a sister line of it is next to it, USG 3342, which is very short in height and also on. Dominion was released in 2005 as well, so it also has PM17, and which came out of the same group as Tribute and McCormick for mildew resistance. Dominion was grown widely in the Mid-Atlantic area. So basically, most of the early varieties, like in barley and wheat, were also awnless or had shorter awns, and we started moving towards more awn varieties of wheat just because deer do not like eating awns in their mouth. So basically we've moved to awn varieties. You don't get a boost in test weight in this area with awn varieties, but also you do get protection from deer. Jamestown was released in 2007. This is another significant variety. It's very early heading, so essentially we were looking to replace Southern States 520. Also, Jamestown has been studied extensively. It has unique resistance to scab or fusarium head blight, has high test weight, Hessian fly resistance that came from roan, so this is a roan derivative, and so it's been apparent in a lot of programs. USG 3555 was a replacement for USG 3209, which was one of its parents, and basically this variety, we always thought it had what you refer to as road appeal. Always looked very, very attractive. It has good resistance to stripe rust, and had resistance to leaf rust and mildew, and also stem rust. So about 3 years ago, prior to that, we hadn't seen stripe rust at all in the eastern US, or rarely, and then 2 years in a row we had major stripe rust epidemics, and so having varieties like Jamestown and USG 3550 that have resistance to stripe rust is very important. Also in variety development, I talked about the importance of developing disease-resistant varieties. Of course, yield is always a primary concern, but something else that is very important is having good milling and baking quality. So we mentioned Wheeler back in the front, having excellent milling and baking quality. This variety, released in 2008, Southern States 5205, also has excellent milling and baking quality. So another significant variety released in 2008 was Shirley, and basically this variety is a full season variety. It has overall has very good disease resistance, with the exception for fusarium head blight and a little weak on Hessian fly, but mildew and leaf rust it's very good for. Also a failure was stripe rust, but that wasn't a problem until about 3 years ago. Shirley has been widely grown, particularly in North Carolina, because it's full season, and also this variety was named in honor of my grandmother's family name, not Shirley Temple. Renwood 3434 was also released in 2008, and as you can see, it's a very short semi-dwarf. So after Jamestown, the next public variety released was Merle, named in honor of Merle Longquist of Crop Improvement. It was released in 2009, having good adaptation to the Mid-Atlantic region. In 2009, SW049-29104 was released primarily for its improvement in fusarium head blight resistance. In 2010, we released this variety, Featherstone 258, for use in both grain, but also with emphasis in use in forage. As you can see, it's a taller variety, has good thickness or biomass potential, and this variety was used in both of those markets. Varieties released in 2011 include 5187J. This variety has been subsequently studied in nitrogen use efficiency studies and was shown to have high NUE efficiency. 12V51, the uniqueness of this variety probably is that it has very good resistance to leaf and bloom blotch. Released in 2011 was 2013-911. This was marketed through FFR. You can see again the in-row characteristic of the variety, the erect flag leaves. This variety was concentrated on use for the forage market. In 2012, we released Southern States 8412. This variety had unique combination of disease resistance and was currently studied by one of my graduate students, Neil Carpenter, who identified adult plant resistance to leaf rust in this variety. Yorktown also was released in 2012. This variety offered a unique combination of traits, having resistance to most diseases including fusarium head blight. However, it was not resistant to soil-borne mosaic virus. In 2013, we released the first variety with the Hessian fly resistance gene H13. So basically with Hessian fly, there's a Hessian fly free date, so if you plant after the first frost, you don't usually have to worry too much with Hessian fly, but in the south that's not possible. So again, we're trying to develop varieties for a fairly wide region, and so having Hessian fly resistance is important. Featherstone 73 actually is a sister of Yorktown. It's a little bit later heading than Yorktown, and it was grown in the region as well. Another sister line of Featherstone 73 in Yorktown was Southern Harvest 3200. Each of these varieties having some unique characteristics to them. This variety was earlier heading than Featherstone 73. So now we come to the second variety, soft white variety, that was released from the program in 2014. And you can see that it's named MCIA Venus, so Michigan Crop Improvement Association marketed this variety. This variety is very unique in that you can see it's kind of a yellow-green color, and when it matures it's very bright and beautiful in the field. In 2014 we released Southern States 8513. And then in 2015, we essentially released a Jamestown derivative. So if you remember, Jamestown was derived from Rome and Hilliard was derived from Jamestown. So you can see the progression of germplasm through the program. Hilliard came from across Pioneer 25 R47 and Jamestown, and basically looking to combine the yield potential of the Pioneer line with the disease resistance of Jamestown. And Hilliard inherited one of the genes for FHV resistance that Jamestown had. Hilliard is very widely adapted. It's a check in both the southern and eastern uniform nurseries and has performed very well in those nurseries. Agramax 462 was released in 2015, again looking for production more in the southern Corn Belt region. In 2016, we released 1616-2660. This was a very early heading variety with high test weight, and you can see it's on. So as you notice as we go through these now, you're going to start seeing a lot more on varieties, again with emphasis on preventing deer damage and feeding. So the next variety is Southern Harvest 7200. So this is the next variety that we developed that has Hessian fly resistance gene H13, again giving it more potential for production in areas where Hessian fly is a problem. We then released L11550 through Lima Grain in 2016. This is actually a full sib of Hilliard. However, this variety is a little shorter in height, and also full season, where Hilliard is more of a mid-season variety. Another sister of Hilliard that we released in 2017 was Dyna-Gro 9811. So basically it's more similar to Hilliard than L11550. Interestingly enough, this variety has purple anthers, and when you germinate the seed and the shoot comes out, it has purple shoot color. Hilliard has yellow anthers and yellow shoot color. In 2017, we also released USG 3118. This is a short, early heading, good test weight variety that has lots of disease resistance in it. Resistance to Hessian fly H13, has excellent resistance to stripe rust and leaf rust. Also, most of you have heard of UG99 and the stem rust problem, which is a different pandemic than what we're currently facing. So stem rust is a potential threat, and so this variety has very good stem rust resistance. So another variety released in 2017 was Berkley. Berkley has, as you can see, has lots of yield potential, biomass production. It's early heading and also has Hessian fly resistance H13. Most of the newer varieties also have a complex of rust resistance genes which give them resistance to leaf rust, stripe rust, and stem rust, although some of those genes are no longer as effective as they used to be. A sister line of Berkley that basically is a little different in plant architecture but has many of the similar characteristics was released in 2018. Featherstone 31 also was released in 2018, generally looking at a full season variety that could be used as a potential replacement for Shirley, although it has awns, which is a good feature. Also has a little bit better resistance to stripe rust than Shirley. The most recent public release was Liberty 5658. This is another milestone in the breeding program as far as introducing unique traits. This variety has a gene giving resistance to barley yellow dwarf virus. Also, it's very unique in that you have very few soft wheats that have dual quality uses. This variety can be used to make sugar cookies or a loaf of bread. So basically it has unique combination of traits and strong gluten strength. So this is probably one of the shortest varieties that you'll see, and when I came here, Dan Brand, who was Wade Thomason's predecessor, basically said we want short varieties because we're double cropping and we don't want a lot of straw to plant in. So, you know, for someone who's 6'3", it's kind of difficult to bend down to look at these kind of varieties, but I made it a priority to try to develop shorter varieties. Laverne was released in 2019, and this actually has Shirley in its background, and actually the name Laverne is a pun on the TV show. So this is kind of the counterpart of Shirley and its replacement. It also has good disease resistance, much better on stripe rust, better on fusarium head blight, also has very good stem rust resistance. So Featherstone 125 also was released in 2019, and basically one reason was it's a full season variety, showed good adaptation to the Delta region. Another reason was it has excellent milling and baking quality. So varieties that were approved for release this year include VA 16W202. It's an early heading short variety that also has overall good disease resistance and Hessian fly resistance, gene H13. 13 VTK 429 is a derivative out of Hilliard, and basically you can see it's shorter in height and has good yield potential, has higher test weight than Hilliard, has good resistance to most diseases including fusarium head blight. So now we're going to change gears a little bit, and we're going to look at the hard-bred winter wheat varieties that were released in the program. So keep in mind that the previous varieties are used primarily for pastry type products. Now we're looking at hard wheat that's used primarily for bread type products. So when we started having interest in developing hard wheats, there weren't that many hard wheats that were very well adapted to Virginia and the region. The European lines tended to be too late maturing, although they had very high yield potential and good disease resistance. The material coming out of the Great Plains was pretty much susceptible to powdery mildew, and so it had its own problems. So an objective was first to evaluate the lines from other regions, which we did, and Vision 10 actually came out of the old Pioneer hard wheat breeding program. We evaluated their lines and selected lines that had potential. Vision 20 also came out of the Pioneer program. It was earlier heading than Vision 10. Both of these were released in 2008. The previous two varieties were actually lines selected from other program. Vision 30 was the first hard wheat variety that was released from a cross we made in our program. One of its parents was a sister line of Renwood 3260, which has strong gluten strength, and basically this line has good quality early heading. Vision 40 was released in 2010. Basically it was a selection out of the Kansas program. The next variety is unique, and also this variety is currently the hard wheat in our region. Vision 45 came from a cross between Provincial, a French bred wheat, and Vision 10, which we showed you earlier. So basically what I was trying to do is maintain high yield potential and better disease resistance of Provincial with the earliness and that adaptation from Vision 10. So this is quite a unique variety. Two other lines that came out of the program and released in 2013 and 15. The first one was LCS Wizard. This variety, so most of these varieties have some European parents in their backgrounds. LCS Wizard was released for production in the southern Great Plains. It also does well in the Mid-Atlantic. 1 year in Kansas State Variety Trial, Vision Wizard to top the yield trial there. LCS Compass, you can see is taller. It was released with Lima grain and basically showing potential for production in parts of Nebraska and southern North Dakota. Vision 50 was released in 2016. This variety was evaluated by some bakers in Kentucky, and they found that it was very good for use in making French baguettes. Our most recent releases in the hard wheat program include Hardy 2519 and the sister line 14HRW41. These two varieties have Vision 30 in their parentage. Again, looking for improvements in previous varieties. This variety is earlier, this variety is mid-season, and basically Vision 45 is quite late heading, so there's a significant need for earlier heading hard wheat. So I saved Durham, Winter Durham for last. Probably a lot of you don't know that the program was working on Winter Durham. Winter Durham is a significant challenge because of the lower yield potential. Also, it's quite susceptible to fusarium head blight. Durham likes to be grown in a very dry conditions so that you get the hard vitreous kernels, get high semolina yield, and good pasta. But we did release two varieties out of the program. The first one was Snow Glen in 2008, which was tried some locally, and then in collaboration with colleagues in Ontario, they released OAC Amber, which you can see is considerably later than Snow Glen. So that ends this part of the tour for the historical up to the current varieties.